Hold on to your butts.
Welcome to episode 49 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. As always, I am joined by Mary, a woman who just got promoted to Queen of the Blizzard Machine. I am literally only Darren. Hi, Mary.
Hi, you're not only Darren. Especially
I am literally only Darren.
You're not literally only Darren. Aren't you
Well,
the
if you would
artist?
keep
Aren't
a-
you the artist formerly known as Darren? Have
Well,
you
if you
reached
look
that
up-
level yet? I mean, we almost.
Mayor, if you look up in the sky and you give a clear eye, you will see my symbol, which is a beer can and a moon. And that's how you can tell it's me. So I'm literally only Darren.
That's the artist formerly known as Darren.
Anyways, how are you? What's going on?
I'm good. Well, thanks for the congrats on the promotion too.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting getting promoted, huh?
It is.
It's always good to get value of your work being done well. So congratulations. I'm very
Thank
proud of
you.
you. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So that's good stuff as you want to move on up the corporate ladder with the old DQ and
Yep.
Kincardine. But you know something? You keep working hard. Pretty soon you'll be on fries.
Yeah,
and be
exactly.
assistant manager. And like they say, that's when the big bucks start rolling.
Exactly.
So-
Yes.
Okay. How was your week overall? We haven't talked since our last week when we
Yeah.
talked about a pretty cool episode, I thought.
Yep. About Monocacy, my week's been good.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, it's been absolutely swimmingly. It's going great. It's rained every day, just about, but it's nice today. So,
Hey, but your
although it is
Born Braves had
humid.
an awesome game last night.
Oh, they did.
That
They
ending was
certainly did.
fantastic with that home run.
It was. It was good to see them do well. But enough about baseball, Mayor. We have plenty of things to talk about here. We got some old school stuff to talk about. Actually, since I am hosting this shindig today, I get to ask you what you are drinking today as we get started.
I am drinking a beer by Collingwood Brewery called Downhill, and I thought that was quite appropriate for what we're going to talk about tonight, which is First Bull Run or First Manassas, because it starts off okay for the Union, but then it just goes all downhill. And I am drinking it out of my Iron Brigade Gettysburg mug because the 2nd Wisconsin is here. And as we all know, they become part of the Iron Brigade later on. But they're here.
They do?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, that's right. They do.
If you want to learn more about the Iron Brigade, check out our episode about the Iron Brigade, which was
Oh, that's
episode
right.
40.
That was fantastic. Wow, look at you. Oh, someone's prepared today. Holy moly. Someone's had more than 5 seconds preparing. So as you mentioned, we are doing thank you so much. We are doing First Manassas for First Bull Run for Battle, First Manassas.
Yes.
And so for the same reason you are, I'm drinking Lagunitas Super Cluster because that's exactly what this damn battle is.
Clusterfuck.
And since William Sherman is at this battle, okay, he is Colonel Sherman at this time. I'm drinking out of my diehard Sherman beer mug. So that is that. First Manassas is the first big real battle of American Civil War. So I thought maybe before we kind of jump into, we talk a little bit about the setup to this because we did a whole episode on secession. And I don't want to go and reinvent the wheel with this whole thing, but I think it's important to kind of talk about how they got to Manassas, Virginia, right? Obviously December 20th, 1860, the South Carolina is going to secede. February of 1861, the Confederate States of America is established with the capital in Montgomery, Alabama. We talked before in the previous podcast about how there's this incredible tension going on between the North and the South at this time, right? April 12th, 1861, that tension literally explodes, Mary, with the firing of Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina.
It's like a beer can that's been shaken for 50 years?
A long time. April 14th, Robert Anderson surrenders a garrison to Pierre Gustave Touton Beauregard, his former artillery student at West Point. And from there, it kind of goes. So April 15th, President Abraham Lincoln marries the 16th President of the United States. He had the hat. He issues a proclamation calling up 75,000 volunteers to put down this rebellion. Of course, the Confederacy the next day, Jefferson Davis, he's the president of the CSA. He responds by calling up 100,000 Southern volunteers to protect his quotation fingers country. And that Lincoln call for volunteers has a trickle-down domino effect because it causes 4 more states to secede, including Virginia, voted 88 to 55 to secede. It was closer than people think. And they're going to refuse troops that are going to be going from Washington through Virginia to South Carolina. So that's going to be kind of the leading up to this. This is not a Republican versus a Democrat thing. This is all parties. Stephen Douglas had mentioned on May 1st, 1861, that there could be no neutrals in this war, only patriots and traitors, which is a fantastic quote. Davis moves his capital to Richmond, Virginia, which is less than 100 miles from Washington, D.C. What you're going to have is you're going to have both leaders, Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln, kind of blowing the conch shell attracting soldiers to their respective capitals to protect them because they're thinking, well, we need to protect these capitals. As we all know, Robert E. Lee on April 18th, he's going to be offered command of the Federal Army. He's going to say no. On the 20th, he's going to resign his commission. It was 420, so he probably celebrated accordingly, realistically.
Of all the Confederate generals, who would you think would smoke weed? Robert E. Lee would be the last on my list, I think.
But you know what, though? The old school Robert E. Lee, Harper's Ferry Robert E. Lee probably would, because those pictures look like he might be a little bit, right? He looks very kaleidoscopic a little bit.
I think AP Hill's more likely.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of these guys do. Gosh, there's many guys we can talk about with that. He's going to be appointed to command those Virginia forces. He's going to be made a brigadier general because he was only a colonel at the time. In Washington, D.C. at the time, it is a complete mess. The state of Maryland surrounds it. It is anti-Lincoln. It is a border state, but they are very pro-secession. Northern troops are going to have to pass through that state as well to get down to Washington, D.C. It leads to that April 19th Pratt Street riot when a bunch of Baltimore riffraff hooligans attacked the beloved 6 Massachusetts Mary coming through that state. It leads to 4 American soldiers dead, 12 civilians dead. Ends up with Lincoln putting Maryland in that martial law. Mm-hmm. He's going to put the legislature in jail so they can't get together and vote on secession. And he's going to suspend habeas corpus. So you have a lot of things going on. And what you have is 2 armies kind of preparing. They're loading up. Winfield Scott, a Virginian, by the way, Mary, he's commanding the government, the Union Army at the time. He's about 1,000 years old, and he weighs about 1,000 pounds.
I was going to say, they have to use a special thing to lift him onto his horse, and every afternoon, Scott has a nap.
Well, let's just say he ain't going to the cupola. I'll tell you that right now.
No, he's not going to the cupola.
He ain't making it up there. He draws up that Anaconda plan, that naval blockade that goes to Virginia all the way to Texas. Yeah. Because he wants to hurt the South's ability to export and import. So the South is really hunkering down and preparing to defend its land. They're not going to be looking to invade anybody. They just want to defend. The North, that Union Army, like I said, is they're massing around Washington. What you're trying to do is you're trying to use the city of Washington at the time as a big training ground. These guys are all green. Yeah. Really on both sides, they're green. The soldiers that they look at this is exciting for them. It's almost like they're going to summer camp. They're finally getting away from these farms, their homes, their taverns. And they're having a great time. This full of patriotism. The city is going crazy with patriotism. The soldiers everywhere. What this is kind of doing is leading up to when these guys ultimately finally clash. There's that issue with Colonel Elmer Ellsworth.
Yes.
In Alexandria, he has that. He raises that New York City fireman.
The 11th New York, right?
The 11th, he ends up getting killed by a guy named James Jackson. And that's going to galvanize the North because he sees that Confederate flag, on top of that Marshall House Hotel. Mm-hmm. And he goes to take it. He gets shot. So these little flashpoints are happening that's really drawing the patriotism out of the Union. Virginia is a little different. It's a gigantic state. It's a powerful state, but it's not a completely Confederate state. The western part of the state is actually very pro-Union. They're not very secessionist. What they want is Lincoln to send some troops over there to protect their asses from these secessionists. So Lincoln is going to send a guy named George McClellan. We've talked about him. He's in charge of the Army of the Ohio at the time. His job is to keep those rebels away. There's a guy named George Porterfield out there, a Confederate. He's kind of causing issues. Yeah. They want to keep him away. It leads to the Battle of Gallipoli on June 30th. What it basically does, it makes McClellan a hero. And they're starting to feel like they can do no wrong. Like this is going to be easy. He walked right through these Confederates again. They did have some issues, though. On the 10th, down at the Battle of Bethel Church, another mass guy, Benjamin Butler, gets beaten up by John Magruder. Yep. And he blames another mass guy, Ebenezer Pierce, for the loss, but whatever. But it's not all good stuff for the Union. But what it's doing, it's kind of giving them a little bit of experience. These armies are totally green, and it's starting to show. But most of them are gathering around their capitals. Yeah, well, and the troops in D.C., like Sherman was in D.C. at the time, obviously, because he's a colonel at the time. He's there with his troops, and he said that the appearance of troops in D.C. was good, but it was manifest that they were far from being soldiers. This is going to be the theme of the Battle of Bull Run. Now, you have the success of McClellan at Philippi, but that's something we'll probably talk about at the end of this episode. That this could be a McClellan, it could be a McClellan thing that he might be able to boost the morale of his troops or whatever and train these green troops really, really well. But General Scott is not happy with how things have been going. Sherman remarks that he seemed vexed with the clamor of the press for immediate action and the continued interference in detail by the President, Secretary of War, and Congress. July the 4th, Congress is going to meet, and the message that Lincoln sends is good and strong. He is recognizing the fact that the Civil War is upon them. Sherman says that compromise
compromise of any kind was at an end. And Sherman feels, after this meeting of Congress happens on July the 4th, that they were able to get stuff done because the Southerners weren't in there fucking stuff up anymore. It's people that are all on the same page and they can work with like definite plans and ideas. But the one thing that has happened, is the capital being moved from Montgomery to Richmond, placing it 100 miles from DC. All of a sudden the media is like, oh my God, on to Richmond. And you see the papers with this slogan. So that's one thing that happens. But the other thing that I think we need to talk about is the enlistments of the soldiers and the fact that they're only 90 days. And that is the huge thing here.
That's the big thing. Yeah. That's the big thing. For what, moving the capital Richmond was kind of a thank you for seceding thing. Many of those guys, those 75,000 guys, signed those 3-month, 90-day papers, okay? And they're close to expiring. And so, yeah, some guys are probably going to re-sign, but a lot of guys aren't. Not everybody did 90-day papers. There are guys who did 2- and 3-year papers, but the lion's share to 90 days. If the Army, and you mentioned this whole on to Richmond thing, this pro-McClellan on to Richmond, this rah-rah thing, which is the outcry, that was a battle cry at the time. If they were going to go to Richmond, it had to be soon, right? If the Army was going to end the rebellion and march on that city, it had to be quickly because you had to build on McClellan's success, but you had to do it. So if you are the Lincoln in the administration, you got a challenge of taking green troops to march on a quotation fingers capital and win with green troops. On the 27th of May, Lincoln is going to decide to appoint a guy named Irvin McDowell to lead this offensive. And he's going to command all the Army troops in Washington. He's going to command, this gets a little confusing when you look at the older battles, but he will command something called the Army of Northeast Virginia. And that's the Union Army. Yeah. Okay. 35,000 guys, 5 division, 60 cannon, pretty good size overall. McDowell, he reluctantly agrees. Okay. He agrees because he's promoted by Salmon Chase.
Yep, they're both from Ohio. They're friends, and Chase describes McDowell as being loyal, brave, truthful, a capable officer, and he resorts to no acts of popularity. But Chase does admit that he doesn't have that. He doesn't have the thing for the troops that McClellan does. Like, he lacks that warmth. McClellan's really able to rally the soldiers, and McDowell just doesn't have that. McDowell too said that he was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I really want to do this. Like, this isn't my thing. But he, as you said, he reluctantly takes this role. He does develop a close friend with General Scott because he serves on his staff. Now, the funny thing is he's going to be going into this battle of Bull Run, and he's about to be fighting against Beauregard and Joseph E. Johnston. He was a classmate of Beauregard's at West Point, and he also serves on the staff of Joseph E. Johnston at one point too. So he has a lot of connections with people he's working with as well as people he's going to be fighting against too.
Now, this guy's not here, but he's also the cousin-in-law of John Buford. So already related. It's already related. He's from my favorite city in the world, Columbus, Ohio, Mary. That's where he's born.
Ew.
And yeah, to your point, his real issue with taking the Army, now it's a great opportunity. He has a chance to be a national hero. These troops are green, and he knows this could be bad. It could go bad. Lincoln, he promotes him, and he famously says, "You are green, but they are green also." And as Kermit once said, it's not easy being green. Right, on either side.
The thing to remember is everybody is green, including Lincoln, including his cabinet. Like, they are going into a crisis that nobody in the world has ever faced before,
No, but he had no choice. He had to take it. I mean, he's being appointed. The reality is, yes, they're green, but it is the opportunity of a lifetime career-wise for a military guy, right? So he's going to do it. Meanwhile, in Richmond, Richmond is the capital now. They're mobilizing their forces. They're going to be going to a railroad junction just outside of Washington near a town called Manassas, Virginia. Manassas Junction, which is about 40 miles outside of Washington. These Rebs, just like we said a second ago, they're very inexperienced. A lot of them wear blue uniforms, federal uniforms, which we're going to talk about later with this because it's a big part of this. There are some Wheat's 1st Louisiana Battalion. They're going to be those Zouaves, and the Union guys have Zouaves like the 14th Brooklyn we'll talk about. So you can kind of see where this is kind of going. The Confederacy, of course, to make things even more confusing, they call themselves the Army of the Potomac.
Yep, because
that's what they're called. Why wouldn't you?
Did the PR or whoever comes up with the names, did the feds post for a job and it paid more? Is that what happened there?
So, but when we talk about Army of the Potomac, we're talking about the Confederates. And we talk about the Army of Northeastern Virginia, we're talking about the Union. That's how this one's going to go. Oh, and by the way, the Confederates wear blue and the Unions wear gray. Yep. So besides that, everything's in good shape. So,
see, this is why it's called a clusterfuck.
So they have 22,000 guys, 40 cannon. They're under the command of West Point classmate, as we mentioned, McDowell, Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard.
Or Beauregard, as we call him.
Beauregard, exactly. His 8 brigades. He also had another army by Joseph E. Johnston called the Army of the Shenandoah, which is in the valley at the time. He's got about 10,000 guys and an additional 20 cannon. He's got 4 brigades, and his headquarters used to be at Harper's Ferry. They got moved to Winchester. So the Federal Army, they're also in the valley. They've got a small force of 18,000 guys by a guy named Robert Patterson.
Who's about 700 years old.
Yeah.
A little bit younger than Scott.
He's not the vampire one. That's not what we're talking about. Different about Patterson. Same age, though, okay? But he's commanding the Army at the Department of Pennsylvania. He's got 2 divisions. Now, McDowell, he's like, all right, I'm going to take this gig. I'm going to do it. Here's my plan. I'm going to take Patterson's Department of Pennsylvania. I'm going to move them towards Winchester, and I'm going to go have him hit Joseph E. Johnston. I want to keep him plugged there. I want to lock him in because I definitely don't want him being able to move to Manassas to participate and support Beauregard down there. McDowell is going to be advancing his army to fight Beauregard at the Bull Run. He really wants to keep Johnston away. That's 18,000 guys. It's got 20 cannon. The more the merrier is what he wants to focus on his guys. And the least the merrier, he wants to focus on the Army of the Potomac, which is now Southern.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, that he might be relying on is just in case he needs Patterson to come down and reinforce him, too.
No, it does. So July 16th, 1861, McDowell, he is going to leave Washington to fanfare and aplomb. The crowds will be in the streets cheering for him. Rah, rah. Everyone's excited because they're going to get a quick and easy victory over these Southern rebellions. This is going to be over. But the South also felt the same. They felt this was going to be easy, too. Leroy Pope Walker, the first Confederate Secretary of War, and he says, and I quote Mary, all the bloodshed as a result of secession could be wiped up with a handkerchief.
Oh, we're bringing that up again, are we?
And we are. That's what he said.
I believe that there was somebody else that said all the blood that's going to be shed could be collected in a lady's thimble. Wow, everything comes full circle.
Yeah, who said that quote of yours?
Someone
That's
did.
Right. Someone did. Oh, well, he must be.
I believe it was the thing that was mentioned in Ken Burns.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
We had this debate like almost a year ago.
We actually did, but I have a quote, though. I
found the quote, too. It's in
here's the thing.
Earlier episode.
Virginia in July is extremely hot and it's extremely miserable as far as weather goes, right? So the heat combined with undisciplined troops slowed McDowell's march from Washington down to Manassas, right? A lot of these troops, this was spring break. This was Daytona for them. They're
having a great
problems.
time.
They're on their way. They're getting into houses. They're getting into liquor. I mean, this is a party. This is the adventure of their lifetime.
Yeah, they keep stopping to pick blackberries. Like both Sherman and Howard talk about the fact that their troops are stopping to pick blackberries. And actually, that's one thing we should probably mention is that McDowell's army is divided into 5 divisions. Tyler commands the 1st division. Hunter will command the 2nd division. Heintzelman the 3rd. Runyon the 4th. He's going to be held back in reserve. And then Dixon Miles will command the 5th division.
Yep, no doubt. So the 18th of July, McDowell is approaching a town called Centerville, Virginia, which is about 6 miles from the battlefield. So he's close. It's slow, but he's getting there. Beauregard knows he's coming. Okay, he knows he is. Beauregard is kept up to date by his movements to Manassas because of a spy network out of Washington, D.C., okay? This is the story of the infamous Rose O'Neal Greenhound.
Yes.
She's passing information from Washington to Richmond. Now, Davis, after this battle, Mary, is going to credit her and say that the victory of Bull Run, sorry to spoil the ending, but the Confederates win this one, was because of Greenhound.
Yep.
She used a cipher.
Beauregard credits her too.
And he does. So she uses a cipher, probably very much like National Treasure, which we talked about.
Yep.
And what's interesting is she eventually, her story, we'll kind of go a tangent real quick. She eventually gets captured. And she gets deported to Richmond. That's what they do. They send her 50 miles away or 100 miles away to Richmond. So later in 1864, she ends up being a blockade runner, and she's running boats. She's running from a boat on one of her boats. It overturns and she drowns.
Yeah, because she's got so much gold.
And she's giving a military funeral down in North Carolina. So that's how it is. But that's how they find out. So Beauregard knows they're coming. And so the intel is there. He knows he's coming. McDowell's sitting at Centerville. And he's looking at maps. He went to that mobile station on 95 to go one of those shitty maps. and he's looking for roads to attack because what he wants to do is outflank them. He looks along a stream near Manassas that's called Bull Run, and he sees this as his opportunity. So on the 18th, McDowell, he's going to take his 1st Division, to your point, under Daniel Tyler, who you just mentioned. He's going to send him across that Bull Run to a place called Blackburn Ford.
Yep.
Now, this is southeast of Centerville, and he wants to probe the Confederate lines. He'll skirmish a little bit. He's going to get driven back by a Confederate, by Millage Bonham, we'll talk about later, and as well as James Longstreet, who everybody knows James Longstreet.
And Tyler's been told not to bring on a general engagement.
Right. I mean, this is called the Battle of Blackburn's Ford, but it's more just a kind of a skirmish. And what's interesting about this is one of the confusion points is the fact that all these guys had similar uniforms on. So they were all green troops, and this was an issue that repeated throughout this battle. And it led to a whole bunch of friendly fire incidents. Some of the rebels, literally like a high school basketball game, would tie white handkerchiefs on their sleeves so they knew not to shoot each other. Because they all had blue uniforms. And so that's kind of how it was. Joseph Johnston at this point, he gets a message to leave Winchester and move towards Manassas to help reinforce Beauregard. It's exactly what McDowell thought was going to happen. It's exactly what it does. He will use trains. And this is the first real example of trains taking troops to Manassas Junction. Don't forget, Manassas Junction is a railroad junction. It's going to be an important piece of the Confederate puzzle for this entire battle. Robert Patterson, we don't know what he did, but he didn't do anything to stop him. But
he's got no fucking clue.
Patterson basically lets him leave. And the best part about it is in his post-report, he astonishingly says, I did everything I could to stop him. And he did nothing. He let him walk on the train and go. So,
and they don't find, and poor McDowell doesn't find out about it until the battle's actually underway. And he's like, information that would have been helpful 3 days ago.
Yeah, he doesn't know McDowell's there. He doesn't know he's coming.
Yeah,
because he's expecting Patterson to keep him at arm's length and hold him off, which he doesn't. So now McDowell is, he's thinking in his head, okay, I'm here. I got these expiring papers. I've got Johnston pinned back at Winchester. This is my opportunity. So on the 20th of July, the day before the battle, he's going to make plans to attack Beauregard that next morning. What he wants to do is he wants to send his troops on that rebel left flank north of Bull Run. Daniel Tyler's 1st Division, this is how they're going to set this thing up. Daniel Tyler's 1st Division, he's going to attack at this place called the Stone Bridge, which is right. Everybody's knows the Stone Bridge, been to Bull Run, but it's going to be a diversion. David Hunter's 2nd Heintzelman, his 3rd Division, they're going to cross at a place called Sudley Springs North, and there's going to be no troops there. And they know there's no troops. That's going to be their primary staging point for their primary attack. Okay, both are going to try to outflank the left of the rebel line and hit them in the rear. That's kind of the plan.
Like Savannah.
Israel Richardson. Yeah,
Poor Savannah.
Israel Richardson, who comes along in different battles down the road, his 4th Brigade under Tyler. He's going to attack at Blackburn's Ford again. Johnston, now he's in town. He arrives in Manassas, and he goes from Winchester, as we said. He's going to end up at Beauregard's headquarters, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, Beauregard's plan, he's going to defend. He's going to guard the fords at Bull Run. He's going to attack McDowell in Centerville is what he would like to do. If he can, but really he knows he's going to defend. He puts Nathan Shanks Evans, his 7th Brigade, which is the smallest brigade. He's going to put them on that left flank right at that Stone Bridge. That's where they're going to be, okay, along that Warrenton Turnpike that goes right west-east into the town. He has Colonel Philip St. George Cock's 5th Brigade guarding a place called Ball's Ford. Now, only in America can you have a guy named Cock guarding a ford called Ball's.
Exactly.
But I'm just saying. Okay?
Well, you know who else is at this battle is Sterling A.M. Wood.
Sterling A.M. Wood. So, hey, don't
our
tell me
friend
this
from
is a
Shiloh.
coincidence. It's a Ball's Ford. Cock, you get on that.
Where's Sterling A.M. Wood?
Millage Bonham's brigade, we mentioned a little bit ago, they're going to be at Mitchell's Ford. Longstreet and Jubal Early, his 6th and his 4th, respectively, going to be at Blackburn's Ford as well. David Jones, 3rd, they are going to be at McLean's Ford. Richard Ewell, we've talked about him many times, his 2nd is going to organize at a place called Signal Hill, which is going to get a lot of their intel up there. Meanwhile, Joseph Johnson, like I hinted at, he's going to end up at a house called the McLean House, owned by Wilmer McLean. Beauregard's headquarters, he's there under this army of the Shenandoah. You got Thomas Jackson, you've got Francis Bartow and Bernard B, and then Kirby Smith is going to come later. So you got some good guys coming, and they are there.
Yeah,
so
Jackson's the first to arrive, and when he does, he goes to Beauregard's headquarters, and Beauregard has no idea that Johnston is on his way, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And Jackson's like, "No, this is what's happening, and we're coming here." And Beauregard's like, "Yeah, what the fuck's going?" He has no idea what the fuck's going on.
But they're going to be at this McLean house, and the great
Yeah.
story with Wilmer McLean is that his house is the one it's the beginning of the battle, and he's going to move to Appomattox, and his house is going to be the one on April of 1865 where Lee's going to surrender. So he's the very beginning, he's the very end. So tough to be him. So 7:20 the night before the battle, it's 8 p.m. Irvin McDowell's going to hold a council of war with his division commanders. He's still reluctant, but he's like, we got to be ready to fight in the morning. Time is of the essence. And again, he keeps focusing on these enlistment papers. We have to do it. We have no choice.
Yeah.
So the 21st, the day of the battle, it's a Sunday. All the pieces are in place now, Union and Confederate, for the first major battle of the American Civil War. Everyone's lined up exactly where they're supposed to be. McDowell's plan that we mentioned before, right off the bat, naturally it screws up because he's got problems. He has to move a large number of inexperienced troops on ground that he never really reconnoitered.
Yeah, because he's got shitty maps.
He's got bad maps. It's dark. He wants to get going at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's pitch black.
Yeah, and that's when he sends out Hunter and Heintzelman with 12,000 men, and they're sent from Centerville to march along the Warrenton Turnpike towards Sudley Springs to get around the Confederate left. These are, again, green men, and the road, as it turns out, is really not great.
The vanguard, the beginning of Shanks Brigade, they're supposed to go at 2 o'clock in the morning. They're not really going to get to go till about 3. So who knows why they were going late. But it's too dark and you can't move, and there's too many guys and the roads are too small. So by 4 o'clock in the morning, they've only gone a half a mile in an hour. So you could be a Canadian with small little legs and move faster than that, okay? But that's as far as they've gone, and they haven't moved very far. So what's going on, to your point, like Sherman, right? He was supposed to go second, but now he's delayed because he has to wait for Schenck. Yeah. So it's already getting a traffic jam. Not the first traffic jam in a morning in Washington, D.C., by the way. Not for nothing.
Howard talks about the same thing when he's marching. He's with Heintzelman, and when they're going, he said the men had to cross this one bridge, and they were like taking off their shoes to cross it and stuff for some reason. And like Howard said, they just got delayed. And by the time his men were crossing, it was like 2 hours after they were supposed to be.
Well, it was supposed to get to the Stone Bridge by daybreak. First light, they're supposed to get there, and they're late. Tyler's division, that whole delay had a domino effect that, to your point, you mentioned a second ago, affected Hunter and Heintzelman's divisions right off the bat. So now it's all screwed up. Now the Rebs, Nathan Evans' small brigade, like I mentioned, they're guarding that Stone Bridge. So that's going to be the first point of contact. They're going to be behind some hills overlooking that bridge, okay? Evans, by the way, real quick, he's a party boy, Mary. This is a fun guy. This is a guy who likes to drink, have a good time, kept a large amount of whiskey in his tents all the time. He just liked to have a good time. He's also an angry fighter. He's a good fighter. He's got some good fighters with him. He's got that Wheat's 1st Louisiana Battalion. That's going to be those Tigers. That's who he's going to have, as well as a 4th South Carolina we're going to hear a lot about later. 5 o'clock in the morning, local news is coming on. Everyone's starting to wake up. Evans is bouncing off the walls. He's ready for a fight. He's all excited. Tyler's lead element is starting to come at this point. They're starting to arrive at that Stone Bridge. Yep. Now, there are going to be 3 artillery brigades, is what they're going to have. And one thing Evans does not want to do, he knows he's got a small group. He doesn't want them to know how small they are, and he does not want them to know where they are. So he's going to sit there and he's going to basically hide. So 5 o'clock, 5:15 in the morning, Tyler opens up his artillery and begins that officially the first battle of Bull Run. Yep. He's going to fire at unseen rebel positions. What he wants to do is he wants them to expose themselves. Hopelessly, recklessly is what he wants to see them do. Yep. He wants them to show where they are. But Evans does not take the bait. They're going to fire for an hour and a half over Bull Run, just indiscriminately firing at spots, okay? And they're trying to see where these Rebs are. It's supposed to be a diversionary attack, which is what it was on that rebel left. Meanwhile, 6 o'clock in the morning, on the other side, Israel Richardson is also beginning his diversionary attack at Mitchell's and Blackburn's Ford, because he wants to keep the rebels in place there, because he doesn't want them sending troops over to reinforce that Stone Bridge, right? He wants to keep them there. And so they're also firing shots blindly across, looking for the positions too. Ironically, one of the shots is going to hit the McLean house, right? While old Beauregard's having breakfast. He's having his McMuffin and his McLatte as a shell comes through the roof, and it's going to get him going. Beauregard's going to get up, and now he's got his dander up, and he's going to get ready for battle. And because these guys are ready for battle, and they're just waiting for it. But this is playing right into McDowell's hands is what this is doing. Exactly. Right? What McDowell wants is him to come out. He wants him to show themselves. And so far, they're not taking it. So by 6:30 in the morning, Beauregard is going to ride out to find his infantry. He wants them to focus on the federal troops that are up at that Stones Bridge area and Mitchell's and Blackburn's fords. That's where the artillery is coming from. Meanwhile, Nathan Evans, Shanks, is sitting there at that stone bridge, and he's still sitting there quiet, not responding to Tyler's artillery. Because again, he doesn't want to show his position, but he is going to send some skirmishers out just to kind of shoot, and Tyler's going to respond by sending skirmishers out, and that's going to be pretty much the extent of that. But Tyler, what the thing about it is he could have sent his entire division right across right then and taken it, because Evans didn't show what they had. He couldn't do it. He had to wait. And that's going to be important later on. So by 7:30, Evans, he's like, you know what? Tyler ain't coming. Mm-hmm. He's just firing shots. He's going to send skirmishers. This is a friggin' diversion, and he knows it. He's like, I smell this out. I smell this, and it is not the cars. I know exactly what this is, right? So,
but doesn't E.P. Alexander come in and help him out too?
He does. So good point. So about 9 o'clock in the morning, Evans gets a direct message on his phone from E.P. Alexander.
Who's the chief signal officer at the time at the wigwag station.
Yeah, he's up wigwagging with his flags.
Look out for your left. Your position is turned.
He isn't throwing balls yet. He's wigwagging.
Those fuckers are bearing down on you, man.
So he sends Evans that message. To your point, your position's been turned, because he sees the dust rising from Sudley Spring, and he sees the glitter of the bayonet. So he knows, okay, this whole position here at the stone bridge is nothing but a diversion. They're going around your left. He figures out and discovers McDowell's plan to go around the left side and get behind the army. So Evans is going to, instead of being idle, he's going to leave his position, leave his brigade, and he's going to reset up his headquarters at a place called Buck Hill at the Stonehouse. And it's right at the intersection of Warrenton and the Manassas Sudley Road. It's right there. You can still see it today. And that's where he's going to be. So in 9:30, you mentioned that big traffic jam, right?
Yep.
David Hunter's 2nd Division is marching from the north about a mile from the rebel left. Ambrose Burnside is running his 2nd Brigade at this time, and he is going to arrive at Sudley Springs Ford and cross and keep moving south down the Manassas Sudley Road. So he's coming bearing right down on Evans' headquarters at the Stone House. Now, Heinzelman, he screws this up because he's the 3rd Division. He's supposed to cross at a place called Poplar Ford.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, he doesn't. He just follows Hunter across the Sudley Spring Ford. So now instead of a 3rd Division that's crossing, ready to fight, they're stuck behind, waiting to cross the ford behind the 2nd Division.
Yep.
So they basically take themselves out of the battle for a while. We'll see them later, but it takes them a little while to get there.
Well, that's what Howard talks about, is this delay. But Howard also mentions that, like, he said that his men were really excited when they started marching, and that they were singing John Brown's Body as they were marching, which is really funny because when Howard's men leave on the March to the Sea in 1864, that's the song they're singing as well. And I thought that was really interesting. The soldiers are singing it all the way through the Civil War. But he said, like, so this is something that's going to play into the entire battle. It was hot, the sun's out, and the men are lacking sleep. So Howard is going to be kept behind in reserve for quite a while. From about 8 o'clock until noon, his men have to sit in the hot sun. And he remarks that before the end of the 2nd mile, as they're marching, a lot of them fell out, sat down, and lay by the roadside sick or faint. And as we are going to see later, this is really going to play into what happens to him later in the battle. But Howard's men are being left behind in reserve, and they're going to be there in the hot sun from 8 until about noon.
We'll hear from Howard later on.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's tightening his sneakers right at this point, getting ready for the 2nd phase of this battle. So by 10:30 in the morning, Burnside's brigade, they're coming down that road, that the Manassas Sudley Road, and they're going to see Evans. Now, he only has 900 guys, and those 900 guys are going to really last a while. So Evans' 900 men, they're going to be at Buck Hill. Evans is going to have guys from the 4th South Carolina, we mentioned, and that 1st Louisiana battalion, Wheats battalion.
Wheats, he's quite the guy. He gets seriously wounded here, and he's told he's going to die, and he's like, nope, I'm going to be the first guy to survive a wound like this. And he does.
Well, there you go. But they're going to be firing volleys at Burnside's guys. So Burnside's lead column is John Slocum's 2nd Rhode Island. And we're going to talk about him quite a bit. Okay, different Slocum. This is John Slocum. Okay. Evans is going to have 2 guns on Buck Hill, too. So he's going to be firing at these approaching lines as well as firing volleys from his infantry. Now, Burnside is going to put his men in battle formation at this point. And they're going to kind of come straddling that Manassas Sudley Road, facing southeast towards Evans on the crest of a hill called Matthews Hill. And they're going to be basically coming down on them. Now, Wheat's 1st Louisianans is going to charge those 2nd Rhode Island guys across the wheat field between the two armies. So they're going to go right at them. They're going to get driven back pretty hard and pretty quickly by those Federal muskets and that canister fire. Now, even before they get close to the Federal line. But this is where the first uniform issue pops up. So they're going to start running back towards the Confederate line, and they're going to start taking fire from the 4th South Carolina as they scampered back. They got those Zouave uniforms on, and they don't know who the hell these people are. In addition, again, they're green troops. So on their way back to Buck Hill, they're getting crossfire from the back, and they're getting hit in the front now. The 4th South Carolina is confused, thinking they're Union troops, just because it was funny about it is, I'm not sure what the story was, but you know what the Louisianans do? They open fire on the South Carolinians for shooting at them. So the Union guys sitting back going, well, this is something new. So this is the Confederates firing upon the Confederates right off the bat. So like, okay, this is a big mess. John Slocum's 2nd Rhode Island, they're at the point. This is a story some people know, some people don't. Slocum, he's fired up. He's going to burn his bonnet, little phrase, right? He's going to pull out his sword, and he's going to turn to his guys, and he's going to yell at his regiment, let's show what Rhode Island can do. And he starts running down the hill, and he stops, and there's no one following him. It's like Bluto and Animal House. Let's do it. What? Where's the Delta House I knew? No one follows him. So he runs down the slope basically alone. And of course, he gets shot in the head and killed pretty instantly. 2 guys go to get his body. One of them is the famous diarist named Elijah Hunt Rhodes. And he talks about it in his diary. He's one of the 2 guys who go down on the hill to retrieve his body. So Slocum is down, and they got to promote a guy to take control of the regiments. And I hate to say it, but it's a guy named Frank Wheaton. God. I just want to shake my head. So
there you go, Ben.
Is going to take over this, okay? And to his point, he's going to tell his men to keep firing. They're the only regiment on the crest of Matthews Hill at this time. And they're taking casualties quick. They're getting popped and popped and popped at these hands of these Louisiana Tigers who are still back fighting again in these 4th South Carolina guys. Wheaton is gonna on his left end, on the left flank, he's gonna put in charge a major named Sullivan Ballou, right? Now, this is the guy who wrote that famous letter to his wife predicting his death. Everyone knows the Sullivan Ballou letter. This is where he's gonna get hit. He's gonna get hit by a shell from Buck Hill and mortally wounded as he's coming in that left wing. And he's gonna die, and won't get into that, but his body gets desecrated and all kinds of stuff. But this is where he gets hit. By 11 o'clock in the morning now, you're getting more troops coming on the field. So David Hunter is going to arrive to reinforce Burnside with Andrew Porter, that 1st Brigade of New Yorkers, to fight those 900 guys from Evans, right? And of course, he screws up his deployment. So Burnside, he gets there, and it just takes forever to get these guys set up. While they're trying to set up the 2nd Rhode Island, these poor guys now under Wheaton, they're getting their butts handed at them on Matthews Hill. And there's no support because you're taking too much time to set up. At some point, Hunter himself is going to get hit in the neck and leave the battlefield.
And Burnside takes over.
He does, as does William Averill, we'll talk about here as well, to take over that division as his adjutant. Now, Burnside, he's okay with this battle overall. He's going to immediately order his troops forward, but of course, like every other screw-up general, he does it piecemeal. And that's the common theme throughout this battle.
Yeah, exactly. It's a common theme.
Some guys are late to go. Some guys go in the wrong direction. Looking at you, 2nd New Hampshire, they just go in the wrong direction, okay? And so Burnside gets pissed off, and so he calls up his old 1st Rhode Island, his old regiment. And he's going to order a guy named William Sprague IV, who was the sitting governor of Rhode Island at this time, who was Burnside's aide-de-camp. He wants Sprague to go to Matthews Hill and arrange the deployment personally. Now, Sprague, remember, he's the sitting governor. Just think about right?
Yep.
You guys have governors.
I believe he later marries Kate Chase.
He does. You guys have queens and kings and princes. We have governors and stuff, but Sprague is going to do it. Now, it's a great story because as he's going to Matthews Hill to deploy his guys, he's going to be shot off of his horse. His horse is going to be shot from under him. He's going to fall face first in the dirt. He's going to be covered with mud and powder, but he's going to continue to do his orders. So he's going to get it. But what's interesting is he's the only governor ever to be in a Civil War battle, sitting governor. That's a good trivia question. But after the battle, he survives the battle. He's offered a position as a brigadier general. You know what he says? Nope. I'll just be governor of Rhode Island. That sounds easier. So that's what he does. But the battle so far is starting to turn towards the Union. And by 11:30, Evans is starting to get relieved by some rebel reinforcements, okay? He's going to get relieved by Francis Bardo, we talked about, Bernard B., from Johnson's army of the Shenandoah, who has arrived.
Yeah.
And they're coming south, moving north across a place called the Henry House Hill, which is going to be the primary focus of this battle. What those guys are going to do, they're going to set up a battle line just north of the Henry House Hill. They're going to have John and Bowdoin, the 6-gun battery. We talked about John and Bowdoin from the Staunton Artillery. And they're going to start to open fire on Burnside's troops, right? Causing crazy casualties in the 1st and 2nd Rhode Island. B and Evans, at this point, they're fired up. They're motivating the Green troops. Let's go, let's go, let's go. That are now at the Henry House Hill. But now he's got 3,000 guys. So the 900 that's been whittling down because of, attrition is now up to 3,000 guys. So if the Rebs are feeling a little confident in themselves, they're going to start to march north towards the Union guys on Matthews Hill. This is the mistake they make here because they're feeding right into it now. So the battle's tilting towards the Union, like I mentioned, especially when Sam Heintzelman's division is going to show up and drive the rebels back. So McDowell, he will now order Tyler's division, who's been chilling at the Stone Bridge over there, to move forward now. He says, come forward. There's nobody here. So they roll through those skirmishes Evans left behind, and they're going to move west on that Warrington Turnpike towards that rebel battle line. Now they're going to hit them right on their right flank is how this is going to go. So you can see how this is going now. The device is crushing down on this Confederate army. Colonel Sherman, Mary, his 3rd, and Erasmus Key's 1st Brigades are going to cross Bull Run. They're part of that Tyler's division, while Robert Shank, his New Yorkers and Ohio guys are going to be in reserve. At this point, the Feds outnumber the Confederates probably 3-1 at this point in this Buck Hill area. General B, he's going to order his 4th Alabama to charge and face them. Just go right at them. They're going to get their asses kicked. That's what's going to happen. If you've been there, you know the terrain, you know there's no chance. The Rebs are basically surrounded on 2 sides at this point, with the Union lines closing upon them. Some rally, guys, the 8th Georgia, they're north in the woods, that northern point of where it is. They're going to get shredded by the 1st Minnesotans. And so by noontime, it's a mass retreat for the rebels. So they're going to begin to fall back. They're running from Buck Hill. They're running for their lives towards the Henry House Hill. And Bowdoin's cavalry, artillery is going to be supporting them. But this is when things are great. McDowell rise up to his line. He's chanting, victory, victory, the day is ours.
Yep, they think they've got it. And they're so confident. But this is where, things start to go. Name of the beer I had tonight, downhill.
Well, narrator voice, Mary. History will soon prove they are counting the chickens before they're hatched, right? So South Henry House Hill, what's left of Evans, B's, and Barton's brigades who are really screwed up. They're really cut up. They're going to kind of try to regather and try to regroup. Their losses are really, really tough. But what they did is it's kind of like we talked about with Monocacy last week with Wallace. They bought time because troops are coming. Their help is on the way.
Exactly. But McDowell does nothing. That's the thing. McDowell doesn't do. We're going to see that McDowell is going to make a huge mistake here with how he goes about to do battle again in a little while.
The first troops that are going to help, that are going to arrive, and they're coming via train on this Manassas Junction, is going to be Wade Hampton's Legion, right?
Yep.
This is infantry, artillery, and cavalry. This is all 3. They're going to get off the train and then go straight into battle, right off the train, right? They come from Richmond and they're going to hit William Averill, who's now in charge of the division. What's interesting about Averill, by the way, do you know how he made his fortune after the war?
Probably something really obscure, I'm thinking.
He's the one who invented asphalt.
Really?
Yeah. So he made a fortune because he invented asphalt for roads. Well, so that's when you drive on the road and you see a nice smooth road.
Averill, you can
thank Averill. So Averill, in charge of that Union division, he's going to send his 27th New York to pursue the remnants of the rebels towards that Henry Hill house, right? Because they're going to figure this is a cleanup method now. Just go up there and finish them up. And they're going to start to take fire from that Hampton's Legion, who I just mentioned had just arrived. Guys, the 7th Georgia. Now, what's interesting about the 7th Georgia is, you know what they're wearing? They're wearing blue federal uniforms, right? So the 27th, of course, mistook them as Federals. Now, they walk right up to them and they get pounded. Now, these are Georgians, and so they open fire on them. Averill is going to send in the 14th Brooklyn, those Zouaves, as well as the 8th New York, who, of course, wore gray uniforms.
Of course.
Because why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
He's going to have them basically fall back, but by 12:30, more Rebs are coming. They're going to arrive south of Henry House Hill, and this is where arrives Thomas Jackson.
Yeah.
Now, Thomas Jackson's in charge of the 1st Virginia Brigade out of Johnson's army. He shows up wearing his blue dress Army uniform.
Yep.
That's how he's going to dress that day. Without orders, he's going to put his brigade right into battle.
Yep.
So he goes up
and he also forms the artillery into a line,
he does.
too.
He sets up right on the slope of Henry House Hill. He has 5 regiments, and he's going to put them just past the hill summit. He's going to have his men lay down away for orders. So they're going to be ready. They're going to be ready.
And he got that idea from, I think it was the Duke of Wellington, who did that waging war against the French.
Yeah.
And because he did the same thing. Like, if you put your men down on the slope, they're not going to see you there. So Wellington would have his men lay down. Mm-hmm. And then this is where he also says his famous, "We'll give them the bayonet." And that's from Wellington as well, because that's what British soldiers did as well.
He had the artillery mentioned is in Bowdoin, so he has some Bowdoin's guns with him.
Yeah.
Beauregard and Joseph Johnston are going to arrive in the field right around at this point with additional artillery support as well. Now, they also come to rally, because don't forget, at this point, their guys are beaten. They're falling back. They're regathering. But now they got Hampton's Legion. They've got Jackson's brigade. They got all of Johnson's army of the Shenandoah. They've all arrived. So you got those 10,000 guys. They've come to basically set up more troops. Now they got 13 guns. They're going to be pretty much ready to defend. So by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, just after lunch breaks over. Everybody comes back to work. Right, the Union is going to restart the attack on Henry House Hill. Yep. Now, the Union attack is disorganized. It's all screwed up. It's piecemeal, because that's just the way they do it. Erasmus Keyes, right? He's in charge of the 1st Brigade under Tyler. He orders his brigade to advance up the hill. We're talking 2nd Maine and 3rd Connecticut. They're going to try to attack the rebel right flank to drive by Hampton's men, to drive him back. And they actually do it for the most part. The 5th Virginia is going to counterattack, and they're going to beat up those Maine and Connecticut guys pretty good and drive them all the way back to that Warrenton Turnpike. And what this is going to do, it's going to stabilize Jackson's right flank. So now the right flank is pretty much stabilized now, right? Jackson is going to take Jeb Stuart and his cavalry. He has 150 guys on each side of his infantry. That's how he's going to set them up on his flanks. So he's ready. The Feds are going to try another attack up the hill. This time it's the 11th New York and the 1st Minnesota. Again, They have batteries also of James Ricketts, who we talked about.
And Griffin.
They're going to have those guns. And Charles Griffin. Now, Ricketts' guns are going to be in the middle. Griffin's going to have 6 guns kind of on the flanks on the outside. This time, they're going to try to hit the left flank. Right flank? Nope. Let's try the left flank this time. And most of the attack of the rest of these battles is going to take place right around here. Ricketts' men are going to start taking sharpshooting fire directly from the Henry Hill house. The sharpshooters who are up in the house, they will turn and they will fire a single shot at the house. Inside the house is old Judith Henry, the homeowner, sitting there probably watching Golden Girls or something, just kind of hanging out.
Price is Right.
The shell is going to hit in her area, and unfortunately, she's going to die, and she'll be the first civilian casualty in the American Civil War. If you go visit the house, you can see her gravestone right outside the house. It's just right there still. Judith's daughter, Ellen, who's also buried there, right next to her, by the way. During the battle, she was hiding in the chimney, and percussion made her permanently deaf. So she lost her hearing because of this battle as well. It's kind of...
and there's also, at this time, Sherman is starting to feed in his men as well. And the first ones he sends forward is the 79th New York. And they are absolutely decimated. And also killed here at this time is a guy named James Cameron, not the director of the wonderful movie Titanic. No, this is the brother of the then Secretary of War, Simon Cameron, and he's going to be killed at this battle. And I think he is with the 79th New York.
What's interesting about this, too, is you see a lot of these names getting killed, but around this time of the day, so you're talking about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're starting to see all these citizens arriving now. All these politicians and these families setting up blankets and picnics and to watch the big battle, and they're all showing up. This is Confederates, too. Everyone talks about the Northern people, but there's also Confederates who do this, too. So by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the 1st Minnesota and then 11th New York are going to try to go to that rebel right again. And this is, they're going to start bumping into the 33rd Virginia, who of course wears blue uniforms, and which is going to rip up the Minnesotans again. And the 11th New York guys again. John Reynolds, Mary, you know him? He shows up here at this point. He's in charge of the U.S. Marine Battalion, which is all wrong.
The Marines are here as well.
The old Virginians will drive them back pretty good. Now, these aren't the Marines that you see here, but now these are pretty much new raw recruits. Now, Griffin's battery is going to lose a lot of infantry support, and they're going to be left exposed. Now, there's a great story of Adelbert Ames, who people know from Gettysburg. He was part of the 20th Maine at one point, 11th Corps, right? He was the one who Chamberlain took over for. Adelbert Ames, when Reynolds, his infantry was guarding the guns, the infantry, when he took off, because he left them completely holding their diaper in the rain. They were just there, completely stuck. So Adelbert Ames is going to personally direct the fire of one of the 10-pounder Parrott rifles himself. And he's going to be severely wounded. He's going to refuse to leave the field. For that reason, Adelbert Ames is going to get a Medal of Honor for this because he's going to protect the guns. The Griffin guns are going to be the focus of this battle for about the next 2 hours. These guns, right? Rebs want them. Union wants to get them. The Rebs take them. Union wants to get back. It goes back and forth and back and forth. Stuart's 1st Cavalry, that 1st Virginia Cavalry, is going to charge these Minnesotans and 11 New York guys, and they're going to force them to retreat again. Ricketts Battery, these guys are also dropping like flies because they have no infantry support, and the Rebs are also shooting the horses. And so they can't move the guns. The guns are basically stuck. Captain Ricketts, we talked about him in Ocasy. He starts yelling, "For God's sakes, boys, save my battery." And he'll get wounded and captured later, but he knows, he doesn't want to lose his guns. Those Griffin guns that we talked about, they'll be captured around now by those 33rd Virginia guns. It's going to give the Rebs a huge advantage as we head into the later part of the afternoon.
Yeah, and that's where, so things are very, very, very chaotic. And that's when Dowell decides he's going to send, this is around the time I think Howard gets his orders, you need to get to Chin Ridge.
Right. That's exactly. A little while. He's got some time to go.
Yes,
Howard's still marching.
Yeah, Howard's actually on his way to Chin Ridge right now. He's marching while this is going on. But yeah, reinforcements do arrive on the Confederate side under Colonel Jubal Early, and he's going to extend the Confederate line.
So picture by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, give or take, Bernard B is on Henry Hill House.
Yeah.
And he's going to ride up to Jackson. He's going to see this artillery duel going back and forth. B is going to say to Jackson, "They're beating us back." And you mentioned before, this is when Jackson does say, "Well, then give him the damn bayonet."
Yeah.
At this point, right?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is B and Jackson at this point were kind of peers.
Yeah.
And B took this as kind of an order. He's like, "Okay, well, all right." Now the field is a complete mess. There's smoke, there's fog, there's all kinds of shit everywhere. B's trying to struggle to find his own guys at this point through the smoke and the haze.
Yeah.
He's going to find the remnants of his cut up 4th Alabamans. And he's going to say, "Let's go." And they do. They point, and they're starting to walk towards Henry Hill House. And this is where the whole legend of Stonewall Jackson comes from.
Yeah.
They're going to get to the point, and they're going to point. B is going to point to Jackson and say, "Look, there stands Jackson like a stone wall. Let us determine to die here today, and we will conquer. Rally behind the Virginians." B, about an hour later, is going to be killed.
Yeah.
The debate is whether or not he meant that sarcastically or he meant it patriotically.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. Depends how it was. But regardless, that's where Jackson gets his nickname Stonewall Jackson, is because that line from General B. As I mentioned a second ago, B is going to be mortally wounded. He's going to be hit in the stomach with an artillery shell, which sounds horrible, by the way. Just saying. B's words do rally those 4th Alabamans, so he gets them going again.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Francis Bartow, he's rallying his broken Georgians too.
Yep.
He's got less than 400 guys at this point, right? He requests, and this is some real Confederate patriotism going on here, real bravery, right? Bartow is going to go to Beauregard and he's going to say, "Give me orders, whatever." He requests orders from Beauregard, and he says, "Tell me if human efforts can avail, I will do it." Basically, I'll do anything at this point. Beauregard says, "Okay." So he orders Bartow. He's like, "Okay, well, see how say so."
About $1 million.
He orders Bartow to go to the back of that stone bridge and take out that Union artillery that's firing on him. So he says, "Take your 7th Georgia and go take out that friggin' that battery that's been giving us a real pain in the ass."
Yep.
He's going to be going. He'll have his horse shot out from under him. He's going to fall on his ground. He's going to yell to his guys, "Come on, boys, follow me." And as soon as he says that, he's going to be shot in the chest.
Yep.
And as he's dying on the ground, his troops are all going to gather around him because they liked him. They thought he was a good guy. He says to his guys, "Boys, they have killed me, but you must never give up the field." He says to his troops, which is pretty cool. Bartow will become the first Confederate brigade general to be killed in this war.
Yep.
So he's the first brigadier general.
The other first that happens here is at one point during the battle, Jackson tells his men, "Yell like furies." This is the beginning of the rebel yell.
3:30 in the afternoon, back at the Henry Hill House, the Union is counterattacking versus 33rd Virginians, right? They're going to be using that 14th Brooklyn, those Zouaves with those red and blue uniforms. They're going to be going. And they're going to be looking again to recapture those 2 guns in Griffin's battery they lost. And this is the thing that's...
It's over 2 guns. It's over 2 guns.
I'll never understand the effort for these 2 guns, but this is the theme for this whole afternoon. These 2 guns from Griffin's battery, right? So it causes this mass retreat by the 33rd Virginia. 33rd runs, it exposes the 2nd Virginia. The 2nd Virginia looks and sees no help, and they turn and they friggin' run too. So now you got these 2 Virginians in full retreat. 14th Brooklyn by Colonel Alfred Wood. He's going to be attacking the Confederate artillery. And then when he gets done with them, he's going to turn to Jackson's entire line. They're freaking going crazy. They're all fired up. They're all pumped up. The Rebs are going to get reinforced by the 4th and 27th Virginia. And then this is when Jackson tells them, because he sees these 14th Brooklyn guys coming on him.
Yeah.
He says, to your point, I'll let you read a line, but he says, reserve your fire. Reserve your fire until they get to within 50 yards, then fire. Give them the bayonet, and when you charge, scream like furies.
Yep.
And that creates the
rebel yell.
The rebel yell.
Which nobody knows what it actually sounds like.
No, there's some stuff on YouTube you can find. It sounds like a high-pitched, repeating little thing.
Apparently, it depended where you were from.
Right.
You know, how it sounded and all that. But this is the first, they think this is the first case of it. Now, whether this is because it's Stonewall Jackson that it suddenly attached to him, it could have been happening before. Like there was one account of a Confederate soldier who said that he went into battle thinking, I'm not going to yell and scream or anything like that. But then he said the first time he fired his rifle, he was like yelling and screaming. And he's like, I did that every single time I did it. It was a thing that they did in battle. So I think the rebel yell probably was common all over the Confederate Army, you know, at some point, not necessarily because of Stonewall Jackson, but it could be. We'll never know.
I mean, I think that's probably what it is. And so, but that's definitely where it gets credit for it. And that's the first example of at least people reported that those troops charging that 14th Brooklyn. So the 14th, they get pushed back all the way back to the Manassas Sully Road. And now you get these 4th and 27th, these guys at Jackson just empowered, right? They're all excited. And now they're doing the opposite of the 14th Brooklyn. Now they're going to be going at Ricketts Battery. These guns are stuck there because the horses are shot. The infantry shot all around him. Now, all of a sudden, the Rebs are in full control of the house on Henry Hill, right? They have that whole area now. And so now it's a back and forth between the rebels and the Confederates to take this hill. The 1st Michigan under Orlando Wilcox Brigade and Heinzman's division. They're the next ones to be ordered to try to get these two guns. So now it's their turn. It ends up being hand-to-hand combat around this Henry Hill house, and they cannot recapture these guns. By 4 o'clock, they're driven back. What's left of the 1st Minnesota and 11th New York and that 14th Brooklyn we just talked about who've been shelled and shot at this entire afternoon, they're going to try one more time to get these guns, and they're going to fall back, right? Yep. Mary, let me ask you a question. When you need something done, you know who you ask? You ask a bunch of massholes from Boston.
Yep,
that's who you ask. Enter the 5th and 11th Massachusetts, right? From Samuel Lawrence and George Clark. These are from William Franklin's 1st Brigade from Heinzman's division. It's their turn to attack. And you know what they do? They get the damn guns. Yeah. They get them, right? They're going to attack those last guns. They're going to force Jackson's men back. And they're going to finally capture these damn Griffin's last guns. Now, unfortunately, they can't hold them. They have them, but they lose them again because Hampton's Legion is going to countercharge. And after some hard fighting, the Rebs get them back again. And it becomes kind of a laughable thing at this point. So by 4 o'clock or so, both armies are both still actively pursuing control of these two guns. The Rebs are going to ultimately prevail here, and they're going to finally take them and hold on to them. But that's kind of how it's going to go. So this fighting for the flag of these guns is going to go on forever. William Sherman, Mary, you've heard of him, Colonel William Sherman, right? He comes, dare I say, marching down the Warrenton Turnpike. Now he's going to attack Henry Hill House. And he's going to have those brigades you mentioned before, the 69th New York and the 2nd Wisconsin.
Well, he has the 79th with him too, right?
Right. But the 69th one becomes the Irish Brigade, the one that Michael Corcoran takes over. So I hate to say it, Mary, he screws up here too.
No, because he puts them in. Sherman puts them in piecemeal. But the thing is like this is like, you know. So not only is it these guys that have enlisted for 90 days, it's not only their first time doing battle. It's for a lot of these guys that even though they went to West Point and some of them have fought in the Mexican-American War, this is something that is very, very different for them. You know, Sherman says this was the first time he saw men ripped apart by cannons, and it is just they're all green here. And he apparently in the hours before the battle, Sherman is like reading, a book as to how to form his men into a battle line because he's never commanded more than 120 men before. So these are even the officers are very, very green, but he's feeding them in piecemeal. And he should have been feeding them in all at once. And his men are facing a much larger force. And that's why a lot of them get absolutely decimated at this battle.
No, he does. He puts them in, it's unfortunately it doesn't work out to, the 13th New York and Isaac Quimby, these dudes from Rochester. They're going to try to attack those Hampton's Legion. And this is where the Confederates kind of play them a little bit. Hampton's Legion's guys are wearing those blue uniforms. As the 13th New York and the Quimby comes up to them, they pretend to be Union guys and say, "Stop firing! You're firing your own men."
Yep.
And they stop and they pull the guns and blow them away.
Yep.
The second Wisconsin wearing those gray uniforms, they pretend to be rebels.
Yep.
The Virginians don't fall for it and fire upon them. And so as they run back to their lines, what happens? It looks like gray troops are charging them. So they get shot at. They get caught in the crossfire. So, I mean, it's
such a
funny
clusterfuck.
In these later battles, when the uniform issue becomes a little more settled, but you can see the mess with this, right? Sherman's going to send your 79th guys, the 79th, to attack Hampton, and they're going to get wounded up pretty good, including Hampton. Actually, he's going to get hurt at this point.
Hampton does. There's a lot of bigger names in the Civil War that get wounded here, like Hampton, and Ricketts does too, right? Ricketts gets wounded.
He gets captured too.
Yeah.
So Hampton's 5th Virginia, they pretend to be feds again. Of course, the 79th fall for again. Now it's 4:30. Things are winding down. McDowell shows up back at the battlefield again to rally his army. He wants to attack Henry Hill House yet again, so he's going to send in those Irish New Yorkers under the 69th under Michael Corcoran and the 38th New York of Wilcox Brigade to attack pretty much in vain to try to get those Griffin's guns again. What the hell? Why not? We tried 10 times, went 11 times. Of course, it doesn't work. So by 5 o'clock, the feds are driving the rebels off Henry Hill House, and they kind of actually hold the area. They kind of have a little success, but they can't hold the ground. Rebs get reinforced by our friend Philip St. George Cock. He shows up along with Millage Bonham. So Cock rises to the occasion, shows up with Bonham.
Sterling A.M. Wood with him?
I don't know if he was there or not. We'll find out. The 8th Virginia, which is part of Cock's brigade, is going to charge that hill. And it's going to cause a big mass panic. And this is when the real big mess really starts for the Union. So the 8th Virginia of Cock's brigade is going to charge that hill. And it's going to lead to really a full retreat. Corcoran of the 69th is going to be caught here. This is when all the federal troops basically say the hell with this and they go. They're going to move up away from Henry Hill House. They'll be panicked. Full flee from the battlefield. Heinzelman's division is the last division with any troops left. And this is when, Mary, they saved the best for last, because marching up the road with this full set of arms comes Oliver Otis Howard, his 3rd Brigade, which is his final brigade to attack. And as Princess Leia would probably say, Oliver, you are our last hope.
He really is. And the thing is because his men, as I said, like they were told at 8 a.m., you need to wait here. They're waiting in the hot sun. It's like 90 degrees. It's humid, not great conditions. The men are exhausted and they're probably dehydrated, which is a horrible feeling. But then around noon, it's like, okay, you guys are going to go to a place called Chin Ridge. And the guy that leads them to it, it should only have been 3 miles. It ends up being a lot longer than that. Yeah. And by the time Howard gets to that position, he's lost he says, I've lost half my fucking men. And he gets there. And as he's going there, he can hear the sounds of the retreat. And he's probably like, what the hell's going on? And he gets there and he's routed completely.
He's going to have a tough time. Now, as he's moving forward, he's going to see stragglers going the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so
and
they're going to be beaten up a little bit.
Now, what's going on?
Now, Howard, you mentioned before, he has a real tough forced march.
Yeah.
Now, Howard screws up along the way because he loses hundreds on the way because this is too out. They drop out. He doesn't let them put their backpacks down. He makes them carry all their gear, which is a huge mistake for him.
It is.
Instead of dropping their stuff off and lighting the load, he makes them carry all their stuff. So 5 o'clock, Howard is going to get put in. He's going to be at a place called Chin's Ridge, right? And which is west of the Hill House. He puts them right at the battle line, and they're going to move forward. Now, again, you're going to start to see this fresh brigade. They're fresh, but it's hot and they're tired. They're just going marching this long route into battle as the Confederates are getting more and more support. They're getting more and more replacements. You can see how this is going, right? So all of Howard's regiments are going to get repulsed pretty quickly at Chin Ridge, okay? His Maine and Vermont men, dare I say, they run from the scene, Mary.
They do.
And that's what's going to happen. The Confederates are going to set up a really, really strong defensive line that's going to run down that Manassas Sudley Road and curl left, and it's going to face Chin Ridge. It's kind of like a backwards L. A strong battle line facing Howard's guys on Chin Ridge. Just when it couldn't get better for the Confederates, right? In comes Jubal Early, 6th Brigade. Kirby Smith's going to show up. They're all going to show up just to be on this line. Kirby Smith is going to be injured pretty quickly. A guy named Colonel Arnold Elzey is going to take over, and he's going to order a charge. They're going to charge at Howard's remaining guys, and they're going to do it towards Chin Ridge. By the time they get there, Howard's guys are pretty much gone already. There's no one to charge.
Yeah, they're done.
They're done. If they flee the fields.
I'm sorry, but if it was anybody else, if it was Hancock leading these guys, it would have been the same fucking thing because they've been waiting in the sun all day. and they're exhausted,
I mean, it's a tough spot for them,
Yeah.
But Howard's retreat is really the last domino to fall for the Union in this situation.
Yeah.
There's nobody left. They're going to be chased, by Elzey and Early and Jeb's cavalry for a while, and eventually they're going to stop chasing them. Early said that he saw thousands of Union troops fleeing up the Warrenton Turnpike. Howard's going to do his best in his defense, Mary, try to rally his guys, but his green troops are in a full panic. They're like, no way. This is an all is well, all is well. You can cue the chariots of theme music. If you want to picture that, they're all running.
Yep.
And this is not a slight on Howard, because I think at this spot, anybody, again, would have been in that spot. These are green troops. They've been marching. Beauregard, he is going to order his line forward to try to grab the stragglers. And this is when they talk about the federal troops in full running. And they're getting slowed down by those civilians who are clogging the roads.
Yep.
And it's going to be called later on as the Great Skedaddle. That's what they call this. So the Federals are going to try to go, and they're getting stuck in traffic jams going back to Washington because of officials and politicians, these buggies that are delaying their escape. But by 6 p.m., the battle is over. And it's going to be a gigantic, gigantic Confederate victory. So any thoughts that this war was going to be a quick battle? These dudes would sign these 90-day papers to get a quick win.
Yeah.
The thimble, the handkerchief, whatever the stuff you want to say, it goes completely out the window. Beauregard doesn't chase him, though, because his army's beaten up too, and he knows it.
Yeah, and the heat has definitely affected them as well, just like it does at, you see in 1864, Battle of Kennesaw, the heat affects these men as well, and that's what plays into a lot of these battles ending in the summertime. It's exhaustion, right? Like there was one point where I think it was Howard's men on Chin Ridge, they would go in to fight and they would stop and go to the stream and fill up their canteens and take a drink, and then they looked down at the stream and it was filled and it had blood flowing through it, just because it would have been happening earlier in the day.
There's so many things about this that end up being a complete rout. And what's something you got to give the Confederates credit for is they have green troops as well, right? They have green troops as well. So looking at the final numbers, at this point, as of July 21st, 1861, this is the bloodiest battle in American history at that time. And there's going to be a ton of these down the road after this, right? So out of the 18,000 American U.S. federal troops, there are going to be 2,700 casualties, right? Out of the 18,000 Confederates, there'll be about 2,000. But to your point, any hope of something that's going to be a quick battle goes completely out the window with this. This is going to be a long and sordid affair that's going to end up being about just almost exactly 4 years. As far as the carnage goes, it really, really has just begun.
Yeah, exactly. The army decides that they need to go all the way back to DC because McDowell's like, we can't reinforce at Centerville like we wanted to. And that's because the one guy that needed to cover the roads was actually drunk.
Well, there's a lot of
there's people who are drunk here. It's very, very very much a clusterfuck in what happens here. Howard says that there was a terrible discontent day by day in the days that followed the battle, that the soldiers don't trust the officers anymore. Some mutinied, some deserted, supplies were short, food is not good. So it's very much a situation that you're going to see in December of 1862, January of 1863 after Fredericksburg. Very, very similar situation is happening here where morale is really low. Now, Howard, his troops actually were 3-year enlistments. He's one of the rare ones that has 3-year enlistments. But, a lot of these 90-day guys, they're probably going to go through this and be like, fuck this. It's soon after this battle, one of the things that happens in the aftermath is Lincoln is finally like, the light bulb goes off and it's like, yeah, this is going to be a long war. They do the 3-year enlistment things. But the one thing here, so McDowell is the one that is often blamed for this battle. And in some ways, just after doing the research for it, I think that's a little bit unfair to completely put the blame on him. He's got a lot of pressure from Lincoln, from the cabinet, from Scott, from these 90-day enlistments to do battle. He's got pressure from the media saying, on to Richmond, that kind of battle cry that they've got going. And the one quote I found was shockingly, from Howard. And it's clear that he and Sherman sat down and talked about this at some point. About Bull Run. Who knows if it was right after or maybe when they were on the Atlanta campaign together on the March to the Sea. Sherman did say that we must not be too critical and hard upon them, for we were green in those days, and we all have to learn by experience. We were taught then many lessons. The indispensable need of organization, of proper commanders, drill, and discipline. How little things like waiting over or over haste in marching or unloading the men certainly forestall defeat. How essential it is somehow to keep the men who fight in confidence and in heart, how and when to bring up the supports and reserves and use them to the best advantage. And that's what Howard takes away from this, and especially after talking to Sherman, is that this whole thing is a learning experience for them. So we all know who comes into command after this. McClellan, and we all see what he does. And McClellan is somebody that is very heavily criticized. And yes, some of it is very warranted, but I think you need to look at Bull Run and look at what McClellan does and look at how he does bring up the morale, kind of fix the AOP and bring them back around from this horrible defeat. It's a lot like what Joe Hooker has to do when he takes command in early 1863. He's got to kind of build on what McClellan has done. Burnside comes in and kind of, but he does break that. He does break that. He takes them to a low point where they probably were, same as they were at Bull Run, and Hooker brings them back up again. So I think when you're looking at McClellan and him coming into command, you got to look back to Bull Run and what he inherited and what he was able to do. And this statement from Howard that this whole thing was a learning experience, that they were all green, and we can't criticize McDowell too much for this. We've got to put some blame onto Lincoln, onto the cabinet, onto Scott, onto the media for all that was going on at this time.
Well, they overestimated the numbers, thinking, okay, if we got so many numbers, it's going to be okay. But it doesn't matter how many numbers you have. They're not experienced, they're not green. And to your point, was a good one, was what McClellan did is he helped get them ready. He saw what happened. He had some success in the western part of Virginia, but he saw the mess that was taking place in Virginia because of these green troops. He knew that he was going to fight these guys again because the Confederates, they're green too, but they're pretty good, and they're fighting in their own land. If we're going to fight these guys down there, we need to be ready. So he's going to spend a lot of time preparing his army to fight. And he will have success. He'll be accused of being slow and plotting. But what would you rather have? A slow and plotting army that fights well, or a fast army like McDowell's gets their ass ripped up? Because that's the choice you have. If you don't have it, if you don't practice, if you're a team, you don't practice, you're going to lose. I don't care how good you are. They needed to practice. And that's what got McDowell in this one is he had those enlistment papers in his head running down. He's having pressure from Lincoln in the White House to get this done quick because if the paper's running out, you have to move quick. And, if you could conjure up his thoughts and read what he was thinking at the time, you could tell by his body language and what he wrote, by his actions, he didn't want to fight this. He reluctantly fought this battle. He didn't want to take the dead position. He did, but he knew he had to do it. He knew that he was going in. And what got him was he had that initial success in the morning phase of Bull Run, when things were going good. But the problem was, too, is where they attacked from. They attacked from the north. If they attacked from the south and took the railroad junction, they could have kept those troops, those reinforcements from coming. As they were fighting in the north, they were getting bogged down at the Matthews Hill and the Henry House Hill. They were pretty much setting up a line there, but they always had that troops, kind of like when we talked about some of these other battles we talked about, Stone's River example. You don't take the railroad station, so you can continually get fresh troops and supplies in. And that was the mistake they made by where they attacked from. So at the end of the day, it wasn't a quick battle. It wasn't a quick war. It was the beginning of a long and sordid stretch for both armies. Dowell isn't going to last long. He's going to be replaced pretty quickly, as you said. And it's going to set up a domino effect of generals in the north until Lincoln finally finds his guy. He will obviously finally win the war, but he does so by letting experienced generals and experienced soldiers fight the battles and not going in half-cocked, which is what happened here.
I think the thing to take away is McDowell, yes, he needs to shoulder some of the blame for this, but not completely. And I think this is kind of when you're looking at Bull Run, to look to who takes over after McClellan and what he has to do, how he manages to whip this army into shape. But the other thing about McClellan too is he had something that McDowell didn't. He was able to get the troops to like him, as arrogant of a bastard that McClellan is. And like, he's not my favorite as a person. He's not great, but I think he definitely is. He has some good points as a general, as we've talked about on this podcast before. He's not perfect at all. He has his errors, but I don't think he needs to shoulder a lot of the blame that he does. We're not being apologists for him, but we're just saying, like, sometimes like these guys need a reevaluation and need to look at the bigger picture to understand what they do. And you can't just say like, oh, it's all his fault.
No, but in a nutshell, this battle, it's a melee. It's a confusing fight between two green armies. The stability that is brought in by Stonewall Jackson, guys like that really do benefit the Confederacy in this one. And I think some of the mistakes that were made, Hunter being hurt early, forcing Burnside to fight, some of the way they attacked by the way that it took so long for Tyler to cross up that stone bridge and send guys like Sherman and Shank and Keyes and Richardson across the bridge when they could have used them earlier. You can see the mistakes that were made, again, using our 2020 hindsight 150 plus years later. Bull Run will still be another battle in the same battlefield next year after that.
Yep. Which was our second episode. That was our second episode. So if you want to hear about Second Bull Run, check out episode 2 of Civil War Breakfast Club, because that's what we talk about.
I will say, just editorial quick point, Mary, there is no more pretty battlefield than Bull Run on the East. There's none. It's absolutely stunning.
Yep.
And if you want to see how important historical value is in this country, I want you to go on Google Earth. I want you to pull up Manassas, and I want you to look north of 95 where the battlefield is, and south, and see all the strip malls and everything else in Manassas, and realize that would have continued all the way across if they didn't save that battlefield. And you can really see it from the sky. So anyway, I think that's a good point to drop off here as we can skedaddle off to our next episode, Mary.
Yep. We have yet to determine what our next episode is, which is the first for us here in Civil War Breakfast Club.
We had a plan for next week, but unfortunately our guest had to change plans.
Yeah,
so
we're gonna push that into August for an August episode, which is totally cool. So we always have contingency plans here at the podcast, so we will come up with that. Usual Facebook Live will be at 10 a.m. on Saturday. So if you listen to this early Saturday morning, you can join us on Facebook for that. Our next book club is coming up, but not till September. But if you want to know what we're reading, we are reading Assassin's Accomplice by Dr. Kate Clifford Larson. And if you haven't signed up for that, info@civilwarbreakfastclub.com, and we will add you to our book club list and send you a invite for that when we discuss it in September. So
very cool.
I think that was a great discussion. Thank you as always for bringing it.
It's a little technical, this one, but it's important.
Sorry, I got a little bit ahead there, as usual.
It's okay. And then just like that, Lee surrendered Appomattox. But no,
it Civil War Breakfast Club episode if I didn't do that at least once per episode.
It's okay. There's a lot of moving parts with this one, but in any case. So anyway, off we go. So looking forward to some next things here as we move on to our next episode. So looking forward to some of the fun stuff we have coming down the pike as we get ready to episode ? Our big 5-0, starts next week.
Yep.
So we'll off to the next one. So Mary, again, great job as always. A lot of fun talking Civil War nerdery with you. No one knows it better than you. And once again, I appreciate the people who listen to the silly little thing we do, because it's so much fun. It is a lot of fun. So anyway, that's that.
I appreciate everybody too, and you know it more than anybody. So there.
Okay, fine.
But yeah, thank you to all our listeners, all your support over these 49 episodes. Can't believe we're already at almost the big 5-0. So anyway, everybody have an awesome Saturday, because that's when this episode drops. So we will see you all on our Facebook Live maybe, and if not, later on.
All right. Peace out, everybody.
See you later, guys. Bye.